Welcome to the deep dive. Today, you've given us a really fascinating puzzle. We've got these excerpts from Margaret Atwood's novel, The Blind Assassin.
Hmm.
And we're not dealing with, straightforward facts. It's more like glimpses into this really layered fictional world, shifting timelines, different perspectives.
That's quite a mix.
Yeah. So our mission today is basically to navigate these fragments, try and uncover some hidden connections, and maybe offer you a richer understanding of the central mysteries going on.
It's definitely a challenge, but a really interesting one. I mean, you've shared this collection.
Yeah.
It's it's so diverse.
Right.
We've got section titles, things like Betty's Luncheonette or The Destruction of Sikil Norn.
Yeah, those titles alone are intriguing.
And they're sitting right alongside what look like, well, actual newspaper clippings. Different years, different places.
The Globe and Mail, Mayfair, Port Ticonderoga,
Mm.
1930s, even 1999.
Exactly. Covering social events, politics, even personal loss. It immediately suggests the narrative isn't, linear. It's fractured. Deliberately so, I think.
Absolutely. And then mixed in with that, you have these almost dreamlike conversations, unnamed people talking,
Yeah, those bits are fascinating.
hinting at a story being built, maybe the Zaiton myth itself.
Could be. It has that feel.
And woven through all of this, you get this very intimate first-person voice, a character named Iris.
Mm-hmm. Reflecting on her past.
Yeah, memory, loss, relationships. It really feels like we're holding, I don't know, shards of different mirrors, each reflecting just a piece of the puzzle.
That's a great way to put it. And that puzzle includes this explicitly fictional world, Zychron, with its own, mythology.
Right, the destruction of Sakil Norn, those disturbing rituals,
It-
child sacrifices, quite dark.
It is. And then we keep seeing recurring names, Laura Chase, Richard Griffin, Reenie,
And bits about the Chase family history, their button factory in Port Ticonderoga.
all set against this backdrop that feels, well, historical.
Yeah.
Hints of the Depression era, maybe wartime later.
It's definitely a lot to synthesize, but that's what we're here for, right? To do the deep dive. Our goal isn't just to list these pieces. We want to explore how they maybe resonate with each other, how the characters, the events, how they might connect across these different narratives.
Which seems so separate at first glance.
Totally. And ultimately, help everyone listening kind of grasp the core tensions, the enigmas presented here. I think there are going to be some surprising links. I really feel like they're there.
Well, what strikes me right off the bat is that juxtaposition. You've got the, let's say, grounded reality, Port Ticonderoga, the Chase family, looks like history.
Tangible stuff.
Then, boom, this vivid, almost allegorical world of Zychron.
Completely different tone.
And sort of mediating between them, or maybe encompassing them, is Iris's perspective. Subjective, full of memory.
Yeah, filtered.
How those different levels, reality, fiction, memory, how they interact,
Mm.
maybe comment on each other. I think that's key. That's where the depth lies.
Okay, yeah, let's try and connect some of those dots then. One thing that really jumps out, for me at least, is this feeling of loss. It's everywhere.
Oh, definitely.
You feel it constantly in Iris's reflections, this kind of undercurrent of mourning.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also right there in the newspaper snippets, like the mention of Mr. Griffin's death and him being connected to the late Laura Chase.
That phrasing is very deliberate. Late.
And then you contrast that personal grief with the apocalyptic destruction of Sakil Norn. That description is so visceral, annihilation.
It's loss on different scales, isn't it?
Mhm.
Personal, intimate loss, and then this huge, almost mythical catastrophe.
Exactly.
That's critical observation, I think. The theme of loss isn't just sort of there. It echoes across these narrative strands. Iris's grief seems to find this parallel, maybe, in Sakil Norn's obliteration, just on a vastly bigger canvas.
So is that Atwood maybe suggesting something fundamental about, the human experience, that loss manifests in different ways?
Could be. From individual sorrow right up to societal collapse, maybe. It certainly makes you think about how we process absence, how we experience it.
And tied right into that, obviously, is memory.
Yes.
Yeah.
Inextricably linked.
Iris's whole narration feels like it's filtered through the past. She mentions visiting a cemetery, tending a specific spot.
Mm-hmm. And that image of Laura.
Oh, yeah, the stark image of Laura coming back in a small silver-colored box. Wow. That points to a really profound, lasting connection to a major loss.
Absolutely. And even the Sekil Norn story explicitly links destruction to memory. It says the real name of the city was erased from memory by the conquerors.
Right, I remember that line.
The pile of stones thus marks both an act of deliberate remembrance and an act of deliberate forgetting. So remembrance and forgetting.
Which raises that whole question about memory itself, doesn't it? How reliable is it? How selective?
Exactly. If a whole city can be deliberately wiped from history, how much of Iris's own story, her personal history, might be shaped by what she chooses to remember? Or maybe what she chooses to forget?
Hmm. That's a really good point. Then we also get these other fascinating bits, the dialogues between those unnamed people.
Storytellers.
Yeah, maybe. They seem to be actively, like, constructing a story. Maybe the Zychron myth we keep bumping into.
Like when one asks for another dimension of space and also the tombs and the dead women.
Yes. And the other one just replies, kind of dryly, "That's a tall order, but I'll see what I can do."
It's almost like watching the scaffolding go up for the fiction.
It is. Like, we're seeing the building blocks.
And what's interesting, there's the tone, too. It's this blend, isn't it? Fantastical elements, sacrificial virgins, mythical creatures discussed in this almost mundane, even slightly humorous way.
Yeah, it's a weird mix.
It makes you wonder about that relationship between imagination, storytelling, and, well, reality.
Yeah.
Could those dialogues be a way for characters within the novel, maybe Iris, maybe Laura, to kind of grapple with their own lives? Or even transcend them through creating something,
Interesting, like processing trauma through fiction.
perhaps? Or just understanding things differently?
And then we swing back to the more grounded social world. Port Ticonderoga, the Chase family.
The Mayfair article.
Right, that reception for Miss Iris Chase, it paints this picture of a certain social class, a specific time, very formal.
Debutante season, almost.
But then you also get glimpses of the town's other side references to the button factory, the factory workers, a different reality.
And the button factory itself, it feels like more than just a setting, doesn't it? Founded by her grandfather making these stolid, practical buttons.
Yeah, symbolic somehow.
Maybe symbolic of a certain rootedness. Or perhaps a kind of fading industrial past, the mention of that Labor Day celebration, but with this undercurrent of anxiety about layoffs.
Right, hints of the Depression, maybe?
Exactly. It hints at the economic pressures, the social anxieties of the period. It feels like a tangible anchor amidst all the other more fluid narratives.
And the characters we glimpse are pretty compelling, even just from these fragments. Iris, our narrator, clearly wrestling with her past.
Deeply.
Laura, she's described as having this powerful imagination. But she's also linked somehow to a police investigation, a morgue visit. It's ominous.
Very. And Richard Griffin, the Toronto financier, he seems to connect the sisters in some really significant, maybe problematic way.
Their relationships feel like the absolute core, don't they? The axis everything else spins around.
Well, that newspaper report about Griffin's death,
Yeah.
it spells it out, doesn't it? He's the brother-in-law of the late Laura Chase and the husband of Mrs. Iris Chase Griffin.
Whoa, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. That immediately sets up this complex, tangled web of family ties and hints at, well, probably tragedy.
Definitely hints at tragedy. And then there's that extra detail, Laura's posthumous debut as a novelist this spring.
Right. Another layer. What did she write, and how does her novel connect to the Zychron story or Iris's memories or anything else?
More questions.
Always more questions. And we can't forget Renee.
Oh, Renee. Yes.
She seems like this constant presence in their lives, Iris and Laura's. You see her in domestic scenes giving her opinions.
Very straightforward opinion.
Yeah. And then later, she's involved somehow in the aftermath of Laura's death. She feels like, I don't know, continuity, a more pragmatic viewpoint maybe.
I think she's a vital grounding element. Her presence gives us that glimpse into the everyday stuff that just keeps going, even when tragedy strikes or people are lost in, well, fantastical stories.
Bit of common sense maybe.
Exactly. Her down-to-earth observations are a real counterpoint to Iris's subjective memories and the, high drama of the Zychron myth.
Okay. So pulling all of this together, trying to synthesize, what are the key takeaways? What emerges when we look at all these fragments side by side?
Well, I think if we connect these pieces, even loosely, several core things become pretty clear. First, those intricate, and you have to assume quite fraught, relationships within the Chase family, especially Iris and Laura. That feels absolutely central.
Yeah, you can't escape that.
Then the themes of loss and memory, they just keep coming up, don't they? In personal memory, in the newspaper facts, and the Zychron myth, even maybe in the act of telling stories itself. It resonates across everything.
It really does. And the way the different realities are played against each other.
That's the third thing I'd say. That deliberate interplay between Port Ticonderoga's grounded world and Zychron's mythic one. It suggests Atwood's exploring something deeper, about how we use narrative, how we make sense of experience.
And it feels like storytelling itself, the act of creating stories, is maybe a theme in its own right.
I think so.
You've got the Zychron myth being built, Iris recalling her past, the newspapers framing events. It highlights all the different ways we construct reality, or interpret it anyway.
Precisely. And underpinning all of it, there's this palpable sense of secrets, unanswered questions everywhere.
Definitely. What really happened to Laura? What was her deal with Richard Griffin?
What's in her novel? Why is it posthumous?
So many secrets. These excerpts really weave this rich tapestry full of intrigue. It just makes you want to dive deeper, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
So if you've journeyed with us through these fragments today, hopefully you have a much clearer sense now of the complex world that's being hinted at here,
From the very intimate lives in a small Canadian town.
to the epic destruction of a fictional city on another planet. We've really only scratched the surface.
Just the beginning.
But I'm sure, like us, this has probably sparked a whole load of new questions for you.
And that leads us to, well, maybe some final thoughts for you, the listener. What do you make of that relationship between the Zychron story and the, quote, real-world events?
Yeah, how do they connect?
Could the fancy stuff be symbolic?
Maybe representing personal trauma or even societal issues.
And what about Laura Chase? What really led to her death? Why did it impact Iris so profoundly?
What secrets are still buried in the Chase family history, or just in the town of Court Ticonderoga itself? Unspoken truths.
The full novel, The Blind Assassin, is obviously where the answers lie, or at least more of the story.
Indeed.
So if this deep dive has piqued your curiosity, we'd absolutely encourage you to explore the complete book. Really immerse yourself in it. Uncover those connections we've just started to touch on.
The different voices, the time shifts, that blend of gritty reality and soaring imagination. It's a really rewarding read. Definitely. And maybe just leave you with this thought. How much do the stories we tell ourselves, or the stories told about us, shape how we see our own past? And maybe even how we approach the future? That feels like a question these excerpts really powerfully bring to the surface.